Drea Humphrey here with Rebel News, and this past weekend I was invited by We Unify to be one of many speakers at the 3rd annual Reclaiming Canada Conference in Victoria. Despite pushback from trans activists who tried to have the conference center here, the Victoria Conference Center, cancel this conference, it took off, and there were many great things that were told for Canadians who are concerned about freedoms, liberty, and democracy in this country. I will be sharing some reports with more of what happened at this conference for you at rebelnews.com, but for now, I thought maybe you'd be interested in what I had to say.
One of the things that struck me when this all started to kick off in 2020 was how quickly people just fell in line and completely changed the way that they had been living for the past however many decades of their life that they'd been living prior to that. You guys remember 2 weeks to slow the spread, 2 weeks to flatten the curve? When that whole thing kicked off, I was just like, guys, there's no way this is going to be 2 weeks. This doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense, but what happened was, over the course of time, the inertia kicked in and people got comfortable. I mean, there was a poll that came out in the UK, and I'm always iffy about polls, but I think this one was legit. And it turned out that most professionals, at least in the UK, most middle-class professionals, I'd assume it's the same in Canada, US, and so on, most people enjoyed the lockdowns. I remember when the lockdowns finally ended in the UK, and the amount of people just anecdotally, but like privately and publicly, who were lamenting the fact that they had to go back to work, or they had to go back to school, or they couldn't just sit around in their house all day in their pajamas. It was sad, really. People grew to revere their own chains. And that's something that's very dangerous. I think on the flip side, though, the way you can use this human ability to your benefit is if there is something that you want, if there's a good habit that you want to develop, if there's something that you want to create, if there's something that you want to build, if there's a health habit, whatever the case may be, even if it's something that you initially struggle with, once you ingrain that habit, then you'll get used to it. So take caution with that. Beware of falling into negative patterns, but if you're trying to get into a positive pattern and reinforce that, it can work very well for you. So I am going to introduce Drea Humphrey to the stage right now. She is the British Columbia Bureau Chief Reporter for Rebel News. So give it up for Drea.
Thank you. Is this on? Thank you. What an applause. I feel like a Nazi in the House of Commons. Full disclosure, I totally stole that joke from True North's Andrew Lawton. But it was too funny not to say again, but only in Canada. Can you believe that was actually a thing? But everybody here actually deserves an applause because you made it in here past the Rainbow Mafia. Yes, absolutely. They lied about you, about who you are, what you believe, and why you're here, and their media parroted those lies, and you did something. And that's what I want to talk about. Why do something today? So when I was asked to speak, I knew right away I was in. I was going to say yes. The organizers would probably say I took too long to respond, to tell them that. Sorry about that. But I was in because I've covered this 2 years previously. And I really believe people are going home, Canadians are going home with nuggets to make our country better. Totally, that's what's happening. And as a Rebel News reporter, I'm on the front lines, sounding the alarm as I should be, and I'd hate to know what Canada would be like if Rebel News wasn't around, especially over the last 4 years. Wow. Yeah. But I'm always telling you what's going wrong, what's about to happen, and I don't get to talk about the solutions much because the people I'm interviewing, what's happening, like we're in the thick of it, it's just happening. So I wanted to be a part of this solution gathering that you're all taking part of. And when I was told the topic, that we're supposed to talk to you about is about censorship and disinformation, automatically, right away, my mind went to the Online Harms Act. The Trudeau government, God forbid we have another 4 years, what on earth would that do to our country? It's scary. And I believe Rebel News is a huge target on that. Maybe the primary, definitely one of the first. And so I was going to talk about that. I mean, just imagine if the law of the land, if what we are going to be living under is that someone can come after you anonymously because of fear of hate, not even hate, fear of hate. They don't have to put a name to the claim. They can go after you, an individual person, $20,000. I think the government gets stuff on top of that. I mean, that would take me right out. So imagine that's the law of the land, and they could do so retroactively. So something you put on Twitter a few years ago, anything you said publicly, imagine that's the law of the land, and then imagine you're a Rebel News reporter. It's scary. So why do another report? Why not take my Twitter down? Why not flee the country to El Salvador? I know you like it. Bukele. If I can communicate and share why I choose to do, then I can give some of those nuggets towards the solution. So I'm going to touch on that, but not right now. And spoiler alert, I'm not special, but I'll get to that. But before I get to why I choose to do, I want to talk about the actual most dangerous form of censorship. And it's far more dangerous and concerning and has already hurt our country so much without being mandated. And that's self-censorship. By far. How many of you are familiar with the bystander effect? Put your hands up. All right, quite a few of you. All right. Popular theory that gets discussed. When I was getting my psych degree, we talked about it a lot. I won't tell you what year that is because I really enjoy when you guys think I'm younger than I am. And, but if you don't know the story, it looks like a lot of you do, it's about the horrible true story, the brutal murder of a woman named Kitty Genovese. I don't know if I'm saying her last name right, but she was attacked when she was trying to come home at night. She was stabbed brutally, and when the reports first came out, it seems like they didn't get it quite accurate. They said there was about 38 people who saw or heard or knew something was happening and failed to act. As time passed, we know it's more about, 7 or so people, several people, but the point is, people could hear her being attacked. They knew something was happening. One man did yell out and say, "Hey, stop, leave her alone." And her attacker did. He left her alone, only to return and finish the job. So I don't know, was he standing in the bushes and watching his victim suffering and realizing the cops aren't coming, no one's doing anything, she's trying to get into this locked door of an apartment, I'm going to go finish her. And he did. He stabbed her, he raped her, and he robbed her. Eventually, the ambulance was called. And what the debate or what the discussion about this theory is, why did people fail to do? Why did they hear something and not come out and see and help? Why did that happen? And the theory is that sometimes people think other people are going to do it. Do you know people like that? They're so concerned with what's happening in Canada, but it's okay. Somebody else will deal with it. And sometimes they just don't want to be inconvenienced. They hear someone yelling, it sounded like she was involved, but maybe it's a domestic dispute. I'm going to keep watching TV. Do we know people like that who have their heads in the sand? I talk a lot about pre-COVID versus post-COVID. So I have my pre-COVID friends and my post-COVID friends, and I love them all. But when I get together with my pre-COVID friends, I'm like, they're talking about like the Kardashians or something. You know what I mean? Like, get your head out of the sand.
So that's kind of the discussion about the bystander effect. But what doesn't get discussed as much is somebody did do something. And she was an elderly woman who was in her 70s. And her name is Sophia Farhar. And Sophia called the police. And she didn't just call, she came down. And she held Kitty as she was suffering and told her help was on the way. Unfortunately, it would be too late. But an elderly-year-old woman walked out in the night to that scene because of what she heard and saw. She didn't know how many men attacked Kitty. She knew she could be at risk, and she held that woman. What made her? What made Sophia do? When we think of the examples of how self-censorship has plagued us, there's so many to choose from. I think back to the time when I started to report on vaccine injuries as soon as the rollout happened. I started covering that conspiracy theory that became true to the media. I think they took about 3 years to tell people about some of them. And one of the first medical professionals to speak out, local BC hero, Dr. Charles Hoff. Yeah. So I interviewed this small town doctor from Lytton, BC, and when he speaks, you just know he's a good doctor. You know, there's a serious doctor shortage in BC. Everybody wants Dr. Hoff, unless you're believing what state media is reporting about him. And so he's saying, you know, they've rolled out around 1,000 of these Moderna vaccines in this small community, and I've had 9 patients suffering from neurological symptoms, and I don't know what to do. I don't know how to treat them. And he's screaming to the mountaintops, going through all the right channels, and he's being ignored. That's why he came to the media. He didn't even have social media or anything. This was not for clout. And he actually, because this was so early on, he went to Bonnie Henry and they entertained him. They actually had a meeting with him, believe it or not. I think it was more to just kind of feel him out, to hear what information he had, but they listened to him. And his 9 patients, some who couldn't open the door, some who couldn't think straight, some who couldn't speak, most who had migraines, and he said, how do I treat them? Surely the top doctor, Dr. Bonnie Henry, knows, right? If she knows, she won't tell you. He was basically told, it's a coincidence. And he's paid the price ever since. He's still getting persecuted to this day. He's still facing a disciplinary hearing coming up. I don't know when the date is. He's still not able to practice freely like he should be. Why did he choose to do? And why did so many other doctors not? I've come across politicians that have ran into me in public, and they'll shake my hand and they'll say like, oh, you know, like, thank you so much for what you do. Don't tell anybody, but I'm a subscriber. I'm sorry, am I a porn star or a journalist? Why am I your dirty secret? More than once that's happened. But then we had some politicians speaking out. Derek Sloan, remember that? Another round of applause. Very early speaking out, paid a heavy price politically, professionally. Why did he choose to do? And why did so many others not? So me, why do I choose to do? I'm halfway through. Let's see how long I can make this go. You know, it's ironic. I wasn't actually going to talk about anything to do with gender ideology, actually. I wasn't planning on doing that, even though I do many reports on that and the harms that it causes children. I wasn't going to talk about it. But as many of you know, we faced lots of opposition. The speakers did, and of course the organizers who did a wonderful job getting us all together. So thank you for that. So I wasn't going to talk, but I'm going to talk just a couple of minutes because, you know, I got to do what I got to do. So I went out there to try to cover their side of the story, and I went out there today, and I had my other security, and Julia, who's in the room, was recording with me. And I went out, and as soon as I got out, it seemed to be civil until I came out. I don't know how that works, but as soon as I got out, I started to get swarmed. Been in that situation before. And one of them approached me, a biological male who appears to dress like a woman. Didn't tell me their pronouns, so I'm going to go with an educated guess that it's a he. And he said to me, "Why are your hands shaking?" And I said, "Because I'm scared. You're intimidating." The way he was surrounding me. And that's the truth. I was scared. But I'm still doing. Many people come up to me when they meet me and they say, "Oh my gosh, Drea, you're so brave. Thank you." No, I'm not. I'm not brave. Trust me. It's funny every time. And it's funny that they said I'm dangerous, because I'm not. I'm still scared. It's still scary to stand in truth and say that young kids, many who are suffering from mental health issues, being told that it's possible to be born wrong, being told that they are able to make a decision that could make them sterile for the rest of their life, or mutilate healthy body parts off of themselves, or destroy their future sex life before their frontal cortex, which is for reasoning and decision making, being told that's okay and not saying anything against it. That's not okay. That's not transphobic. The people who are telling these children the truth, that there's hope for you, that you're beautiful just the way you are, that you have your whole life to figure your future out, let's just wait on this important issue, those are the people that care about trans kids the most. So the secret is not about being brave. It's not about having all the answers. It's simply about doing. And I'm not a public speaker, but I would call myself a chronic speaker. My mom is here, and she would know that, every report card I got growing up was like, "This kid won't shut up, she's a problem." So I agree, not everybody can speak to do something. But we can all do something. I started this off by saying you all did something by being here, but you can be intentional and do something every day. One of the things that I love doing, and that everybody in this room can do, is just have intentional conversations from love with strangers. So when I do grocery shopping and I see that clerk who's got a mask on in the middle of summer, and they're young, they're not even the age that, we know, we saw the stats. Anyways, I ask them, number one, can I ask you a question? If you ask that, they will not be offended by the question. That's my experience. They give you permission. Why are you still wearing a mask? I don't say it in a condescending way, I don't say it in a rude way, and they tell me. And that's what they're trying to censor so much, is that simple conversation of really understanding where people are coming from. And that's really my goal when I speak to the people outside. I believe they're hurting. I want to know why. And when they tell me, sometimes they've got a reason that makes sense. They don't have all the information that we have. They'll say, someone's sick that I live with, and it's almost always out of love. But every once in a while, I notice that the person who answers, it's almost like they were waiting for this moment because they don't know why they're wearing it too. And I wonder, maybe they're not even wearing it anymore after that simple, intentional discussion, and it usually leads to elsewhere. We can all do little steps like that. And if we had, and we did right up, if the people didn't self-censor, the trouble that we saw with our freedoms, our liberties, our relationships, it simply wouldn't have happened. It wouldn't have had power. Just going back to reporting on vaccine injuries, after that interview with Dr. Hoff, as journalists do when they do a story, I got way more tips coming in about vaccine injuries. And again, this is right after the first rollout. And a lot of them with Moderna had the same type of neurological things. And they said, I saw that report. Oh my gosh, my husband, my sister, my whoever, they are going through the same thing. Can you call them? And I would call these people, and I would spend hours on the phone with these people, trying to convince them to tell their story. And they wouldn't. They would not budge. These were people who were bedridden, some couldn't walk, some, they were the breadwinners of their family, and they wouldn't tell, not just the public, they wouldn't tell their extended family, they wouldn't tell their neighbors. And it was all out of fear, which of course was a big driving force for self-censorship. Fear of causing vaccine hesitancy. And that term, I mean, we know what the two words together mean. We always did, but it was birthed. It was given life during the COVID era by the unelected health lords that have been ruling us. But it was given power by the people through self-censorship, avoiding the truth. One man, like I said, he couldn't get out of his bed, and he had troubles talking. He was embarrassed about talking because he couldn't talk properly ever since. Imagine if he had simply told his neighbors and they saw the drastic change. Choose to do. So that's the message I want to leave you guys with. I hope it's a nugget that every day we have a choice. We might not always know whether or not, no, I'm going to change that. We do get faced with the option of deciding to be a good Samaritan like Sophia Farhar, the 70-year-old elderly woman, or a bystander. So I want all of us, if we believe we are hearing the cries of help for our nation that is worth fighting for, the help me. And even though we don't fully understand what the danger is, we know there is a danger. Let's choose to be the Good Samaritan like Miss Farhar. Thank you. Thanks.
Make some noise for Drea Humphreys.
At Rebel News, we're committed to bringing you the other side of the story, but we are nothing without you. If you appreciate Rebel News and the work that we do, consider being a part of what makes it possible by going to rebelnewsstore.com and buying anything you like for yourself or your loved ones. And until Canada Day, we have a special discount for you. If you buy 2 unisex shirts, you get the third free. We appreciate your support.